One of the things that I love to see is when people who are against Donald Trump and this current administration come on TV shows like this with someone like a Katie Pavlich who is very pro-Trump and will always try and frame everything in a pro-Trump type of way to her audience. In this clip, we're going to see David Touri, who is former State Department, repeatedly push back and also shut down Katie Pavlich's blatant lie when it comes to all things to do with NATO and the war that's taking place with Iran. As usual, let's watch the clip in full and then I'll give you guys my commentary, my thoughts, my perspective towards the end. Let's get into it.
What is your response to them now saying, yeah, we're happy to get involved after the hard part has been finished?
I don't think that's quite what happened. I think they planned these meetings before there was this announcement today that was a bit surprising from Iran that they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz. And so they were intending to figure out how do we make sure and that we can help. Now, President Trump is very critical of NATO for not helping. But let's also remember that President Trump didn't consult with NATO before he went into the war. He didn't work hard to convince the NATO countries and our allies that we needed to do this war, that this was a war out of necessity. And so he only came to NATO a couple weeks after the war started when things weren't going well and begged NATO to help. It's also important to remember that this isn't actually the primary function of NATO. And, you know, NATO is essentially an alliance to protect against the threat of Russia. And that's primarily what it's been always for, the Soviet Union and then Russia. So NATO countries might have helped, but they weren't consulted in advance. But there's
David,
also...
what about...
There's
wait,
also
just one second on that. Just one question, follow up on that. Like, it's not even that the president asked for troops or aircraft. He asked for us to be, the U.S. to be able to use NATO bases and for the U.S. to be able to use our own bases in places like the United Kingdom, France, et cetera. So this idea that they were, you know, not consulted ahead of time, they weren't even interested in letting us use our own property.
Well, he also asked them to provide naval ships, including mine-clearing ships, which Europe has and could have provided, and that would have helped.
They could have.
Now, I agree with you that I don't think our closest allies in Europe should be denying us from using our bases there. Those bases are there to help ensure the security of the United States, in addition to the security of the countries that they are in. But you have to remember that the European countries were concerned about some of the things that President Trump was saying. He said he wanted to destroy a civilization, so they don't want to be part of that. I do think the NATO countries would have come on board if President Trump had worked harder. But remember, the NATO countries also have a reason to complain about President Trump because he's completely cut off assistance to Ukraine. There's no U.S. aid going to Ukraine right now. And that's also an important crisis.
We're still selling weapons
where the U.S.
to Ukraine.
Could help.
We're selling lots of weapons to NATO, and then NATO is transferring them to UK, which means
but there's no U.S. government assistance.
Yes, no, but they're still buying weapons from us. We are allowing NATO to buy them.
Weapons.
Okay,
yeah,
we're allowing NATO to. I want to get to the
distinction.
Z, but I just want to clear this up for people. The United States is still selling weapons to NATO. NATO is finally buying them and giving them to Ukraine because NATO has not been footing the bill for the war that's on their continent for many, many years. Nazir, I want to get to you.
Wow,
Europe, let me get Nazir in here,
Europe
David, please. Please, David, please, Nazir. While European leaders are discussing what they are in Paris. The Iranian regime, of course, is still hanging their own people. We're hearing about the fact that they are still going after people who protested against the regime in this brutal, awful fashion. So what is your assessment now that there's a deal on the table with the uranium and the objectives of Operation Epic Fury? The president never put regime change on the table as an objective. However, he has talked about standing with the Iranian people. What is your assessment of what's happening inside the country?
Good evening, Katie. Thanks for having me back. I just want to dial this back a bit, just for a few seconds. I want to ask David to reconsider what NATO is. NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization to curb the Russian influence when they were Soviet Empire. It's like March of Dimes. March of Dimes was there to combat polio. But once polio vaccine was created, it went off to do other good stuff. And I think that's the story of NATO at this point. So back to the president. The president has always had an affinity for the Iranian people. I have known him since his days in New York City as a real estate entrepreneur, a successful one. He's had many dealings with other Iranians in New York City in real estate business, and some of them who are closely related to my circle of people. And he constantly, when he was not in politics, asked me about the plight of Iranians. How many people do you have back in Iran, and what are they up to? So it has been something that he has constant ideas about. And we know in 1987, he took a one-page ad in a major publication to ask the foreign policy establishment back then to reconsider tougher measures on the Iranian regime. It's refreshing to know that the president cares so much. I don't think this is a political ploy. If anything, it hurts him because midterm elections are coming up. And now that the deal is almost on the table, Katie, this is where I'm a little apprehensive. This deal is not going to be done anytime soon. They're worlds apart and worldviews apart. The problems are many. I don't even know what Iranians have thought they agreed to. I don't think they know. I don't think the president knows the details. If this deal goes on the way it has been going on since today, I think it's a master stroke of Trump's art of the deal. It's either a great divide and conquer campaign so that the Iranians embarrassed to what they agreed to, they go back to Tehran and they get under extreme pressure by the principalists, by the hardline people, and they have to walk back. And there's fraction and all kinds of infighting now between the regime operatives, or it's an actual diplomatic move and a cooperation. Yeah. I see more of the first than the second, knowing the president.
Yeah, it seems, given that the blockade is still in place, there are thousands of U.S. troops in the region. They've sent even more planes over the course of the last couple of weeks. The president is going to force the Iranian regime to comply with what the United States wants. David Touri and Dr. Nazih Moinian, great to see you both. Thank you very much.
So, no, when it comes to Katie Pavlich and debating anyone, she consistently cuts them off. She consistently speaks over them, and she never lets them finish the point. Did you guys see when Katie Pavlich tried to spread the lie to her audience that NATO hasn't been spending the same when it comes to the US in terms of defense budget when it comes to Ukraine? Blatant lie. But we saw David Touri push back, but she shouted over him simply because of the fact that she knows he's telling the truth. This is what the problem is with MAGA. They are so dependent upon their audience, thinking, that their audience is dumb and they won't do their own research, that anybody who tries to challenge them and actually gives their audience facts, guess what? They will not allow it. Now, in regards to what it is that I believe her name is Nazih Moinian, said, exactly what David Touri said NATO is, that is exactly what it is. They are a defense organization. They never go on the offense. Now, when a member of NATO is attacked, guess what? That is when the rest of the NATO members come together and they will stand with their ally. But let's have it right. Donald Trump has been consistently attacking NATO, has been threatening to invade and annex a member of NATO in Greenland. So it's very, very fair for people to be very apprehensive about wanting to come to Donald Trump's aid when he's been speaking so bad about us for a very long time. Now, note, I say us because I'm British. So all of the negative things that he said about our fallen soldiers who died in wake of what took place in 9/11, I definitely believe that everybody has the right to be able to push back against Donald Trump and not be so willing to put themselves out on a limb for him. Now, look, if in the United States of America, this very war is very unpopular, why would these other leaders then go and put themselves forward and put their countries and involve their countries in something that is very unpopular within their countries as well? It will be political suicide. So the fact that it is that someone like Katie Pavlich, like this Nazih Moinian, are trying to push this propaganda when it comes to NATO and the negative framing and the positive pro-Trump framing, this is what the problem is with politics today. But it's no surprise, this is MAGA, and this is what it is that MAGA do. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this clip in the comment section below. And while you guys are down there, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and guys, turn on the bell notification. So much more clips like Katie Pavlich getting owned are on their way. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next clip.